Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst, no life jacket, into one of the most romanticized and brutally misunderstood lifestyles in history, the golden age of piracy. But we're not here to talk about buried treasure, parrots on shoulders, or swinging from the rigging with a cutlass in your teeth. No, we are going to look at the one thing that truly defined a pirate's life, day in on day out, the horrifying, stomach-turning, and frankly, miserable food they had to eat. You think you'd make a good pirate? Trust me, after tonight, you'll be grateful for that slightly stale bag of chips in your pantry. You'd probably be begging to walk the plank by day 3. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is what keeps this little channel afloat on the vast seas of the internet. And while you're at it, drop a comment letting me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The salt spray hits your face for the first time, and it feels like freedom. You're finally here, standing on the worn, slightly sticky deck of a pirate sloop, the familiar sight of the grimy port town shrinking behind you. Just yesterday, you were a nobody. Maybe a tailor's apprentice with ink-stained fingers, or a farmhand tired of smelling like dirt and disappointment. But now, you're an adventurer, a free man. A brother of the coast. That's what the recruiting posters you called and actually read seemed to promise. You look around at your new crewmates. They aren't the dashing, smiling rogues from the storybooks. They're a collection of hard men with weathered faces, missing teeth, and eyes that seem to hold a permanent squint from staring at the horizon. They come from everywhere: escaped indentured servants, disgraced naval sailors, and optimistic fools like yourself, all drawn to the promise of a life where you take what you want and answer to no king. This is a common historical truth, by the way. While the Royal Navy did press gang sailors, many pirates were willing volunteers, seeing it as a step up in terms of pay and personal liberty. Your heart is pounding with a mix of terror and exhilaration. You sign the ship's articles, a rough piece of parchment that outlines the rules. You get an equal share of any plunder. You have a right to vote for the captain, and there's a detailed compensation plan. This is where you get your first real taste of pirate pragmatism. The ultra-real taste of pirate pragmatism. The arsed right arm might get you 600 pieces of 8, a left arm, only 500. An eye is worth the same as a finger, 100 pieces of 8. It's less a band of merry men and more a high-risk, high-reward maritime corporation with a very morbid insurance policy. As the ship cuts through the waves, you're trying to absorb it all. The rhythmic creak of the hull, the snap of the sails in the wind, the low murmur of conversations in a half-dozen different accents. You're imagining the first prize you'll take, a fat Spanish merchantman loaded with silver. You picture yourself, cutlass in hand, leaping onto its deck in a glorious, chaotic battle. You see chests of gold, silks, and spices. You see yourself living a life of legendary excess. But, as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a different, more immediate need makes itself known, a rumbling in your stomach. You haven't eaten since a stale piece of bread you snagged on the docks this morning. You see a man with a wooden leg and a perpetually sour expression, the ship's cook. Your old limped out of a hatchway, banging a ladle against a pot. The sound is dull and uninviting. This is it. Your first meal as a pirate. You eagerly follow the others, your mind filled with images of roasted pig, overflowing tankards of ale, and a feast fit for a king of the seas. You are about to learn your first, and most important, lesson: the greatest treasure on any pirate ship isn't gold or silver. It's something, anything, edible. And as for the glorious pirate code, you signed historians still argue about how much power it really held. Was it a genuine exercise in shipboard democracy, a revolutionary concept for its time, or was it just a clever piece of paper a charismatic captain used to keep a crew of desperate, violent men from tearing each other apart before they even found a target? You get the feeling you're about to find out which version is true on this ship. The hard way. For now, all you can think about is food. You shuffle forward in a loose, informal line, your stomach now making noises that are less a polite trumble and more a desperate plea for assistance. The cook isn't serving food from the galley itself. That cramped, smoky firebox is just for heating things. Instead, a different man stands guard over the provisions. HES the quartermaster, you learn, a surprisingly sober-looking man with a ledger book tucked under his arm. He, not the captain, is the master of the ship's daily life. He holds the keys to the food, the drink, and the discipline. HES, the ship's accountant, HR manager, and walking rulebook all rolled into one. And right now, he has the most powerful job on the ocean. HES, the guy standing between you and dinner. Someone asks for an extra portion and the quartermaster gives him a look that could curdle milk. The request is denied. Everything is rationed, he explains in a flat voice. Every man gets his share, no more, no less. This is piracy, not a charity. Before the food is doled out, the quartermaster needs a hand bringing up some supplies for the coming week. He points at you, the new guy. You, come with me. It's not a request. You follow him to a large hatch in the middle of the deck and descend a creaky, near vertical ladder into the belly of the ship. The cheerful sea breeze is instantly replaced by a thick, heavy air. It smells of damp wood, tar, stale bilge water, and something else, a dusty, faintly sour scent, like a forgotten pantry. He holds up a single flickering lantern, and the weak light spills across the hold. Your romantic imagination, still clinging to hope, expects to see captured silks or casks of fine wine. Instead, the lantern illuminates the pirate's true treasure, the Fort Knox of their existence, a damp, dark room filled with ugly, personality-free barrels and lumpy, uninspiring sacks. This, you realize with a sinking heart, is the ship's larder. Here she is, the quartermaster says, with a complete lack of ceremony. He thumps a large, dark barrel with his fist. The sound is a dull, solid pork. That one over there, salted pork. The ones in the backwater. And maybe some beer if we're lucky. But that won't last a week. The barrels are stacked 3 high, raced against the gentle rock of the ship. They look ancient, stained with grime and salt residue. He then gestures with his lantern towards the dozens of coarse canvas sacks spiraled in a corner. And this, he says, his voice devoid of any culinary excitement, is your bread. You look at the sacks. They're just sacks. Dusty, vaguely rectangular, and promising nothing but monotony. This was the reality for nearly every long-haul voyage in this era, from the grandest naval monarch war to your humble pirate sloop. The menu was dictated by a single, unforgiving principle: what won't rot. There was no refrigeration, no canning in the modern sense. Preservation meant one of two things: drying it until it was a rock, or packing it in so much salt that no living organism would dare take up residence. You're looking at months, maybe a year or more of this. You help him haul a sack of, well, you assume it's the bread up the ladder. It's surprisingly heavy, like a bag of rocks. Back on deck, the cook has a large pot of something simmering over the firebox. As you get your ration, you finally understand. You're handed a slab of something that looks like a giant, pale cracker, and a scoop of a watery, nondescript stew is ladled into your wooden bowl. You look at the slab. It's hard. Unnaturally hard. You can see greasy flecks of something that might be the salted pork, boiled for hours to make it marginally chewable. You look from your meager, beige-colored meal to the glorious, deep blue of the open ocean. The freedom you felt an hour ago now feels conditional. It is conditional upon your ability to stomach this food. You tap the slab against the railing. It makes a sharp clack sound. You look over at the cook, a man whose job seems less about culinary arts and more about applied chemistry, how to turn these 3 basic ingredients into something that won't kill you immediately. The actual status of a ship's cook is something historians still debate. Was a good one who could work magic with slop, a revered and protected member of the crew, or was he just the guy who drew the short straw and was forced into the thankless, greasy job looking at your bowl? You suspect it's the latter. For now, all you know is that your grand adventure has begun with a meal that a prisoner would send back. You take your bowl and your mystery slab to a quiet spot on the deck, wedging yourself between a coil of rope and the ship's rail. The sun has almost completely disappeared, and the first stars are beginning to poke through the twilight. It should be a moment of peace, a time for quiet reflection on your new life. But all of your attention is focused on the immediate, pressing issue of your first pirate meal. You decide to start with what seems like the safest option, the liquid. You take a sip from your canteen. The water is fine. It's a little warm from being on deck all day, and it has a faint, woody aftertaste from the barrel it's been stored in, but it's wet. It's recognizably water. You watch a few of the veteran sailors, and they drink theirs without a second thought. But then you overhear a conversation that chills you more than the evening air. The first mate is talking to the quartermaster, planning the voyage ahead. The water in the forward cask is already turning. He says, not with alarm but with a weary resignation, as if discussing a predictable change in the weather. We'll need to start the beer rations by the end of the week. You don't understand. Turning, how can water turn? It's just water. But you're about to learn a fundamental lesson of life at sea. The fresh water brought on board is a ticking clock. It's stored in wooden casks that are rarely, if ever, properly cleaned. They might have previously held wine, salted fish, or even something less pleasant. The wood itself is porous, a perfect breeding ground for algae and bacteria. In the first few days, the water is drinkable, like what you're having now. But very quickly, a thin, green film of algae starts to grow on the surface inside the cask. The water develops a slimy texture. A few weeks out, it's no longer just slimy, it's thick with green, stringy goop and gives off a putrid, sulfuric smell, like rotten eggs. Drinking it becomes an act of sheer will. This wasn't just a pirate problem. It was a problem, it was a problem, it was a problem for every sailor in the age of sail. They called it ropey or stringy water. The Royal Navy had official procedures for dealing with it, which usually involved filtering it through a cloth and just hoping for the best. This is where the ship's beer and grog come in. Many ships, including naval vessels, would carry huge quantities of weak beer. It wasn't for getting drunk, the alcohol content was very low. It was because the beer, having been boiled and fermented, was safer to drink for longer than the water was. It was a low-alcohol, liquid form of calories and hydration. When the beer ran out, or for ships that didn't carry it, the solution was grog, a mixture of the foul water and rum. The alcohol in the rum killed some of the bacteria, or at least masked the foul taste enough to make it swallowable. You take another sip of your currently okay water, but now it tastes different. You can almost feel the future slime in your mouth. You look at the dark, churning sea around you, water everywhere, and soon, not a drop you'll want to drink. This leads to one of the strange little ironies of life at sea. Pirates were obsessed with capturing ships carrying wine or brandy, not just for the party, but because a cask of wine was a cask of wine was a cask of safe, long-lasting liquid. A prize ship's most valuable cargo wasn't always its gold, but its beverage selection. You set your canteen aside, your thirst suddenly gone. It's time to face the solids. You dip your spoon into the stew. It's mostly broth, thin and greasy. You manage to spear a small grayish lump. You put it in your mouth and chew. And chew. It has the texture of a pencil eraser and a flavor that is overwhelmingly, aggressively salty. You swallow it with a gulp of that suddenly precious water. This, you realize, is the famous salted meat you've heard about. It's an ancient preservation technique, packing meat in barrels with massive quantities of salt to draw out all the moisture and make it inhospitable to bacteria. But the process also turns the meat into a substance that is barely recognizable as food. One of the big debates among maritime historians is just how bad this stuff really was. Some accounts claim it was so hard it had to be carved with a chisel, while others suggest that with proper soaking and cooking, it was merely bland and tough. Based on your current experience, you're siding with the carve it with a chisel camp. As you struggle to saw off another piece with your spoon, you realize that your adventure is going to be less about fighting Spanish soldiers and more about fighting your own dinner. And it's a fight you're not sure you can win. Your attention now turns to the final component of your meal, the large pale slab sitting ominously beside your bowl. You've been putting it off, but there's no avoiding it. This is your bread. You pick it up. It feels heavy, dense, and completely devoid of moisture. It's about the size of your hand and maybe half an inch thick, with a surface pockmarked by small docker holes. You tap it again on the railing. Clack clack, the sound is closer to a piece of wood than to any bread you've ever known. An older sailor sitting nearby, noticing your confused hesitation, lets out a dry chuckle. "That's ship's biscuit, lad," he says, his voice raspy, "or as we call it, hardtack. Don't try to bite it straight. You'll leave your teeth in it." He demonstrates, taking his own piece of hardtack and smashing it against the heel of his boot. It breaks into a few smaller, jagged chunks. He pops one into his mouth, not to chew, but to let his mouth, not to chew, but to let it slowly soften with saliva. You follow his advice, a little embarrassed. You bring the slab down hard against a thick metal cleat on the deck. Instead of shuttering, it just makes a loud thwace, seek high, and leaves a small white scuff mark on the iron. You try again, harder this time, feeling ridiculous. Finally, a corner chips off. You pick up the small piece and examine it. It's made of a simple, grim mixture flour, water, maybe a little salt. That's it. No yeast, no fat, no anything that might make it palatable, or, more importantly, perishable. This is the fuel of empires, the carbohydrate that powered crews for centuries. Hardtack was designed for longevity, not flavor. It was often baked months, sometimes even years in advance. It was double or even triple baked to remove every last molecule of moisture, turning it into a flour-based ceramic. Its nutritional value was purely caloric. It was designed to fill a stomach and provide energy, and it achieved that with brutal efficiency and the complete disregard for the diner's pleasure. You tentatively place the small chip in your mouth. It's like sucking on a flavorless rock. Your saliva barely makes a dent in its stony surface. The sailor sees you struggling and shakes his head. "No, lad, that's not the way. That's not the way. Watch." He takes another piece of his shattered biscuit and drops it into his stew, or what's left of it. He lets it sit there, submerged in the greasy broth. Give it a few minutes. Let it soak. It's the only way. You do the same, breaking your hardtack into smaller pieces and pushing them into your bowl of salty meat water. While you wait, you look more closely at the larger piece you still hold. The little holes covering its surface, you learn, were made by a tool called a docker, which prevents the biscuit from puffing up into an actual, God forbid, bready texture during baking. They also serve another unintentional purpose. As you stare, you think you see a flicker of movement in one of the holes. You dismiss it as a trick of the lantern light. You fish a soaked piece out of your stew. It has now transformed from a rock into a spongy, waterlogged lump of dough. It's still tough, but it's chewable. The flavor is, well, it mostly tastes of the salty, greasy stew, which is probably a mercy. You manage to get a few pieces down, the sheer blandness a welcome relief from the aggressive saltness of the meat. This was the daily grind. The combination of hardtack and salted meat, often boiled together into a single, monotonous porridge called lobscouse or skilly, was the foundation of the maritime diet. It was unsatisfying, and it was a constant reminder of how far you were from a real kitchen. One of the odd little facts about hardtack is its incredible durability. Civil War museums in the United States have pieces of hardtack that are over 150 years old and are still perfectly preserved, if you can call it that. They are, for all intents and purposes, edible fossils. Historians still debate the specific recipes and baking methods used in different navies and by different suppliers. But the core principle was always the same: create a food that is as close to being geologically stable as possible. You look down at the remaining piece in your hand, and for a fleeting moment, you wonder if it's older than you are. The thought doesn't make it any more appetizing. You break off another piece and drop it into your bowl, resigning yourself to your fate. This isn't a meal, it's a task to be completed. A chore for your jaw. A week has passed. The novelty of the sea, the creaking of the ship, and the endless blue horizon has worn off, replaced by a dull, aching routine. The days are long and filled with hard, monotonous work, swabbing the decks, mending sails, keeping watch, and endlessly coiling ropes that seem to have a mind of their own. But the true drudgery, the real anchor weighing down your spirits, is the food. Tonight, you're having the salted meat again. This time it's pork, or so the cook claims. It arrives in your bowl looking virtually identical to the salted beef you had on the first night, a grey, stringy lump swimming in a lukewarm, greasy broth, accompanied by its faithful, stony companion, the hardtack. You've learned the trick now. Break the biscuit, soak it in the stew, and try to swallow it without thinking too much. You're starting to understand the grim logic of the ship's larder. The meat was prepared on land, sometimes years ago. Butchers would pack it into barrels with a truly staggering amount of salt. We're not talking about a generous sprinkle for flavor, we're talking about a thick crust, with layers of salt packed between each layer of meat. The sheer volume of salt was meant to draw out every bit of moisture, creating a desert-like environment where bacteria couldn't survive. This is why it's called salt horse or salt junk. The term junk here likely coming from an old nautical term for worn-out rope, because the texture was about the same. Before cooking, the cook has to soak the meat in a bucket of seawater for hours, sometimes a full day, just to draw out enough of the salt to make it remotely edible. If HES in a hurry, or if fresh water for soaking is being rationed, you get a meal like the one you had on your first night, so salty it makes your tongue curl and your eyes water. Tonight it seems HES had a bit more time. The meat is still tough, requiring a heroic effort from your jaw, but the saltness has been dialed back from painful to merely unpleasant. You saw a piece of it before it was boiled. The cook hauled a slab out of its barrel, and it looked less like food and more like a strange, petrified relic. It was a dark, brownish red, stiff as a board, and coated in a white, crystalline layer of salt. He had to use a small hand axe to chop a piece off. As you chew, you find yourself thinking about the animal this came from. Was it a healthy pig, or was it some old, sickly animal sold cheap to the victualler who supplied the ship? This was a common scam. Unscrupulous suppliers would pack barrels with low quality, sometimes near rotten meat, knowing that once it was blasted with salt, it was hard to tell the difference until weeks later at sea, when it was far too late. Naval records are full of complaints about suppliers providing barrels that were underweight or filled with more bone than meat. For pirates, who often stole their provisions or bought them with no questions asked, the quality control was even worse. This leads to a little game the crew plays. They call it the salted meat lottery. Sometimes you get a decent piece, with a good ratio of fat to lean. Other times, you get a lump that is pure gristle and sinew, impossible to chew. And on a really unlucky day, you get a piece from the bottom of the barrel, one that's been sitting in its own brine for years, absorbing all the flavors of the aging wood and stale air. One of the older sailors tells you a story, a well-known piece of naval folklore, about a barrel of salted pork from the 17th century that was opened and found to contain a whole pig, perfectly preserved, but so hard it was impervious to a knife. The story goes that the sailors carved it into the shape of a piglet and used it as a ship's mascot for the rest of the voyage. You're not sure if it's true, but looking at the leathery substance in your bowl, it feels plausible. Historians are still divided on the true quality of this meat. Were these horror stories the exception, or the rule was the average sailor's meal a barely edible nightmare, or just a very, very boring and tough piece of protein? Your personal, first-hand research is strongly suggesting the former. You finally managed to swallow the last of your pork eraser. You're not full, not in the satisfying way you remember from land. You're just not hungry anymore. Your stomach is filled, but your senses are completely unsatisfied. You look out at the endless ocean, a vast, beautiful wilderness, and you realize you've traded a world of flavor, texture, and variety for this. For gray, salty, timeless meat. And the worst part, you know you'll be eating it again tomorrow. It's been a few weeks at sea now, and you've fallen into the rhythm of things. You know the names of the sails, you can anticipate the ship's roll, and you've even learned how to sleep through the snores and groans of 20 other men packed into the forecastle. You've also become a reluctant connoisseur of hardtack. You know that the pieces from the center of the sack are slightly less likely to break your teeth than the ones from the edge. You know the precise amount of time to soak it in your skilly to achieve the perfect level of chewable sogginess. You are, in short, a survivor. But tonight, you make a discovery that changes your relationship with the ship's biscuit forever. You're sitting in the deepening twilight, munching on your soaked hardtack. The stew is the same as always, but you're so hungry you barely notice. You're about to take another bite from the dry piece you hold in your hand when you decide to do something you haven't done before. You look at it closely. In the dim, flickering light of a nearby lantern, you examine the surface, and then you see it again. That little flicker of movement in one of the docker holes. You're sure it wasn't a trick of the light. Leaning in closer, your heart sinking, you see a tiny, pale, grub-like creature wriggling its way out of the hole. It's a weevil, a shipped biscuit weevil, to be precise. You stare at it, horrified. You look around. None of the veteran sailors seem to be inspecting their food. They're just eating, their faces impassive. You quietly show your infested biscuit to the old sailor who gave you advice on your first night. You point at the wriggling larva. He squints at it, then shrugs. A weevil, he says, as if you've just pointed out that the sea is wet. They're always in there. He explains that the hardtack, despite being baked into a near fossilized state, is not immune to pests. Weevils and their larvae, known affectionately to sailors as bargemen or clampers, are an unavoidable part of the experience. The sacks of flour used to make the biscuits are often infested before they even get to the baker. The eggs lie dormant within the finished hardtack, just waiting for the slightest bit of humidity on a sea voyage to hatch. The result is that a few weeks into any trip, the biscuits are practically alive. Most of the lads prefer to eat in the dark, the sailor continues, a grim smile playing on his lips. What you don't see, you don't fret about. He then tells you a common sailor's saying when you break a piece of hardtack. You should tap it on the table. The weevils will fall out, but the larvae, which are embedded deeper in the biscuit, will stay in. So it was a choice eat the lesser of two evils. You feel a wave of nausea. How many of these have you already eaten without realizing it? You look down at the soggy, half-eaten pulp in your bowl. You can't tell what's biscuit and what might be extra protein. The very thought makes you want to empty your stomach over the side. This is one of those wonderfully disgusting historical tidbits that is overwhelmingly confirmed by primary sources. Journals from naval officers, pirates, and merchant sailors alike are filled with complaints about weevil bread. It wasn't a sign of a bad ship, it was the standard. You break off another piece from your biscuit, feeling a morbid curiosity. This time, you hold it up to the lantern and inspect it carefully before eating. You count 1 to 5 little pale grubs wriggling in the tiny tunnels they bored. They are, essentially, living in a fortress made of food. You feel a strange, grudging respect for their resilience before being overwhelmed by disgust again. The question of what to do about this is a topic of some debate, even among historical food experts. Did sailors really just not care, as your crewmate suggests, or did they have methods to try and mitigate the problem? Some accounts suggest they would rebake the biscuits on board if they had a good enough oven, a process that would kill the weevils but also make the hardtack even harder, if such a thing were possible. Others mention dunking the biscuit in their coffee or grog, not just to soften it, but in the hopes that the drowned weevils would float to the surface so they could be skimmed off. You can't bring yourself to eat the rest of the biscuit in your hand. You toss it overboard, watching it bob on a dark wave for a moment before disappearing. But you know you can't afford to waste food. From now on, you'll have to make a choice. Do you inspect every piece and try to pick out the inhabitants, a tedious and stomach-turning task, or do you adopt the veteran's philosophy and just eat in the dark? You look up at the star-filled sky, a canopy of pure, clean light, and feel utterly disconnected from it. Down here on the deck, in the world of men and ships, everything is tainted. Even your bread is crawling. The water in the casks is officially turned. The quartermaster made the announcement this morning with all the ceremony of a man reading a weather report. What started as a faint woody taste has progressed through the slimy phase and has now settled into a full-blown ecosystem in a barrel situation. When you lower a dipper into the cask, the water comes up lukewarm, cloudy, and smelling faintly of a swamp. Little green things float in it. Drinking it straight is no longer an option unless you're actively trying to get sick. And so, the era of grog begins. This afternoon, the quartermaster unlocks a special barrel, one kept under his watchful eye. It's a cask of rum, plundered from a small merchant vessel you took last week. The air is immediately filled with the sweet, heavy scent of molasses and alcohol. A small cheer goes up from some of the men, but it's a tired, half-hearted sound. They're not celebrating a party, they're celebrating a party, they're celebrating the fact that their drinking water will now be slightly less disgusting. You watch the ritual for the first time. The cook's mate, a boy no older than 16, ladles a measure of the foul, swampy water from the water cask into a large wooden tub known as a scuttlebutt. Then the quartermaster himself carefully measures out a portion of rum and pours it into the water. He stirs the mixture with a wooden paddle. The resulting concoction is a murky, brownish liquid. You get your ration in your tin cup. The rum is strong enough to mostly mask the swampy smell of the water, replacing it with a sharp, alcoholic bite. You take a sip. It's not good. It's not good. It's warm, slightly slimy, and has a weird combination of sweet rum, foul water, and the lingering taste of the wooden tub. But you can get it down. And that's the entire point. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about pirates and their relationship with rum. The movies show them constantly swigging from bottles, perpetually drunk and cheerful. The reality was far more practical and far less fun. Rum wasn't primarily a recreational beverage on the high seas, it was a water purifier. It was a chemical additive used to make a contaminated liquid safe, or at least palatable. The invention of grog is officially credited to a British vice admiral named Edward Vernon in 1740. He was concerned about his sailors saving up their daily rum ration, which used to be served neat, or pure, and getting dangerously drunk all at once. His solution was to order the rum to be diluted with water, and he also suggested adding sugar and lime juice to make it taste better. The sailors, unimpressed, nicknamed the new drink grog after the admiral's nickname, Old Grog, which he got from the waterproof Rugrum cloak he often wore. But pirates, being less concerned with naval discipline and more with simple survival, were likely mixing their rum and water long before it became official Royal Navy policy. For them, it was just common sense. The water is foul, add the strongest thing, you've got to kill the taste and hopefully the germs. This pragmatic approach is a core part of the pirate identity that often gets lost. They weren't chaotic evil, they were often just chaotic practical. As you sip your grog, you notice something else. The quartermaster is watching everyone. The rum ration is strictly controlled. Drunkenness was a serious problem on a ship where a moment of inattention could lead to a fall from the rigging or a mishandled sail. The ship's articles you signed had specific punishments for being drunk on duty. Again, the reality of pirate life clashes with the myth. A ship full of constantly drunk pirates wouldn't last a month. At sea they'd be a danger to themselves and the vessel. There's an ongoing debate among historians about the exact strength of this grog. Was it a stiff, intoxicating drink, or a much weaker, almost medicinal mixture? The answer is likely it depends. On a ship flush with captured rum, the mix might be more generous. When supplies were low, it would be stretched thin, becoming little more than rum-flavored water. It was a matter of supply and demand. You finish your cup, you feel a slight warmth in your belly from the alcohol, but you're far from drunk. You just feel hydrated. The daily water ration is no longer a hydration source, it is now the base ingredient for your daily dose of medicine. And the rum, that symbol of pirate freedom and revelry, has been revealed for what it truly is: a glorified water filter. A flavoring agent for pond scum. You look at the rum cask, then back at the water barrel. One is the poison, the other is the antidote. And you need both to survive. Your life now depends on this strange, unhappy marriage of rotten alcohol, served daily in a tin cup. It's been over a month at sea, maybe closer to 2. You've lost track of the exact number of days. Time has begun to blur into a monotonous cycle of watch duty, chores, and the grim ritual of mealtime. The salted pork and beef are still the mainstays of your diet, but something has changed. The meat is no longer just grey and tough, it has taken on a more sinister appearance. Tonight, as the cook slops a ladle of stew into your bowl, you stare at the lump of meat that lands with a wet plop. It's dark, almost black in places, with streaks of an unsettling, greenish tinge along the edges where the fat should be. When you poke it with your spoon, it doesn't yield like meat. It has a slick, leathery surface, and the texture feels more like old shoe leather than anything that was once part of a living creature. You look around at the other men. No one bats an eye. They just attack their portion with the weary acceptance of long-suffering prisoners. You, however, still have the memory of fresh food to torment you. You can't help but feel a fresh wave of revulsion. This is the inevitable fate of barreled meat on a long voyage. Even packed in salt, decay is a slow, relentless process. The meat at the top of the barrel, which gets used first, is generally the best preserved. But as the crew works its way down, they get to the pieces that have been sitting the longest, pressed under the weight of the meat above, soaking in a brine that is itself aging and becoming contaminated. The black color comes from a combination of oxidation and old blood, while the greenish sheen is often a sign of bacterial growth that even the massive amounts of salt can't entirely prevent. The meat becomes tough and string as the last of its internal structure breaks down. The flavor, if you can call it that, intensifies. It's no longer just salty, it has an acrid, faintly metallic taste, a soreness that hints at the slow putrefaction happening at a microscopic level. The cook does his best. You see him adding peppercorns and other spices to the pot, if the ship has any. Spices were incredibly valuable, not just for their own worth, but for their ability to mask the taste of food that was going off. A pinch of cloves or a few peppercorns could be the difference between a meal that tasted like old salt and a meal that tasted like old salt and a meal that tasted like old salt with a hint of spice. It was a form of culinary camouflage. One of the weirdest and most disgusting tidbits from this era is the concept of sweet meat. This didn't mean sweet in a sugary sense. It was a term sailors used to describe meat that was on the verge of turning. Meat that had a faint, sickly sweet smell of early decay was sometimes considered a delicacy by men who were so accustomed to the harsh, chemical taste of salt that any other flavor was a welcome change. It's a testament to how skewed their palates had become. You try to eat your portion. You saw off a small piece with the edge of your spoon. The texture is appalling. It's slick on the outside but dense and fibrous on the inside. You chew it for what feels like an eternity before you can force yourself to swallow. It's heavy in your stomach. This degradation of the food supply was a constant source of tension on any ship. The quartermaster was often accused of saving the good barrels for the captain's table or for his friends, leaving the dregs for the rest of the crew. Whether this was true or not is a matter of historical debate. Was there really a hierarchy of food quality on a supposedly egalitarian pirate ship? Some sources suggest that, in theory, everyone from the captain to the cabin boy ate the same rations. It's easy to imagine the man with the keys to the pantry giving himself and his allies a slightly less green piece of pork. You see some of the other sailors cutting their meat into the smallest possible pieces, trying to maximize the surface area that can be softened by the thin broth. Others simply swallow the chunks whole, like pills, with a swig of grog to wash it down. It's no longer about eating, it's about fuel injection. You give up on the last piece in your bowl. You can't do it. You discreetly toss it overboard when no one is looking. Wasting food is a serious offense. But you do rather risk a lashing from the quartermaster than another bite of that green-tinged leather. As you watch the dark lump sink into the black water, you have a terrifying thought. You're only 2 months in. There are barrels and barrels of this stuff left in the hold. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get greener, blacker, and tougher. The memory of a simple roasted chicken, something you once took for granted, now feels like a fantasy from a distant mythical land. The ship's cook is a man named Silas. He is missing 2 fingers on his left hand and has a face that looks like it was carved from driftwood and left out in the sun too long. For the first few weeks, you thought his job was the simplest on the ship: boil water, drop in meat and biscuits, serve. But as the provisions have worsened, you've started to realize that Silas is not just a cook, he is a magician. A practitioner of the dark arts of culinary deception. His primary battle is against the senses. How do you convince 30 hungry, irritable men to eat something that their eyes and nose are screaming at them to reject? You watch him at work near the firebox, and it's a masterclass in damage control. His first line of defense is the spice chest. It's a small locked box to which only he and the quartermaster have a key. Spices plundered from a Dutch merchantman are more precious than gold right now. You see him add a careful pinch of something to the massives to pot a few black peppercorns, maybe a single precious clove, or a shard of nutmeg. These aren't for flavor in the way a chef on land would use them. They are weapons in an olfactory war. Aromatic compounds are meant to overpower the sour, funky smell of the decaying meat and the musty scent of the weevil biscuit. It's a desperate gambit. Sometimes it works, creating a stew that smells vaguely of spice. Other times it fails spectacularly, resulting in a smell like a spice rack fell into a swamp. His second technique is relentless, exhaustive boiling. The pot is on the fire for hours. The goal is twofold. First, to boil the leathery meat and stony biscuit into some semblance of submission, breaking down their fibers until they are at least theoretically digestible. The second, and perhaps more important, goal is to boil away any identity the ingredients once had. The green-black pork, the greyish beef, the weevil-infested hardtack, after 6 hours of simmering together in a pot of grog water, it all merges into a single homogeneous, brownish-grey sludge. It's a strategy of mutually assured destruction if everything tastes equally of nothing, at least nothing tastes specifically of rot. This brings you to one of the strange, uncelebrated dishes of the pirate world, lobscouse. It's a catch-all term for a shipboard stew, and its recipe was one of desperate improvisation. The base was always the same hardtack and salted meat, boiled to pulp. But from there the cook added whatever he could find. If the ship had captured some onions or potatoes before they rotted, they went in. If there was a bit of salvaged fat or grease, it went in to add calories. Some recipes even called for ground-up anchovies or a splash of vinegar if available. Anything to introduce a new flavor to the palate-numbing monotony. You saw Silas at work on today's lobscouse. He was pounding the hardtack into dust with a belaying pin before adding it to the pot, hoping it would act as a thickener. He chopped the green tinged meat into minuscule pieces, so no single bite would be overwhelmingly terrible. He was a master of distraction, a culinary illusionist trying to fool your tongue. This desperation led to some truly bizarre food innovations. One little-known fact is the use of portable soup. This was a precursor to the modern bouillon cube, invented in the 18th century. It was made by boiling down meat and bone broth for days until it became a thick, gelatinous, resin-like block. This block was shelf-stable and could be transported easily. A cook could then break off a piece and dissolve it in instant soup base. But contemporary accounts describe it as having a foul, glue-like taste. It was less of a soup and more of a science experiment. The historical role of the ship's cook remains a fascinating puzzle. Were they, like Silas, respected artisans working in impossible conditions? The famous pirate Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts had an article in his pirate code stating that the ship's musicians could rest on the Sabbath, but no such provision was made for the cook. His job was never-ending. Yet, a cook who could successfully make the inedible edible would surely have been a valuable asset. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. He was a vital, thankless cog in the shipboard machine, cursed with the most difficult job on the high seas. Tonight you take your bowl of Silas S. latest creation. It's a thick brown paste. It doesn't look like meat or bread. It just looks like stuff. You take a bite. It's thick pasty, and has a vague, generic saltness with a faint hint of pepper. It's not good, but it's not actively offensive. It's a culinary ceasefire. Silas has won. He has taken a collection of truly awful ingredients and, through sheer force of will and fire, transformed them into something you can swallow without gagging. Miserable victory in a long, miserable war. And tomorrow, hell have to do it all over again. There's another crew on this ship, one that never signed any articles, never takes a watch, and never gets a vote. They don't sleep in the forecastle, yet they are everywhere. They are the rats. You knew, intellectually, that a wooden ship of this era would have rats. But you were not prepared for the reality. They are bold, sleek, and terrifyingly numerous. You see them skittering along the beams in the low-silencing mess deck. You hear their scratching in the walls as you try to sleep. A veteran sailor told you to always hang your boots upside down from a hook, otherwise you might wake up to find a rat has given birth in one of them. At first, you thought of them as just a disgusting nuisance, a sign of the general filth and decay of your new home. But you started to realize they are more than that. They are your direct competitors. They are eating your food. The quartermaster wages a constant, losing war against them. The ship's larder, the hold where the barrels and sacks are kept, is supposed to be sealed. But the rats always find a way in. They gnaw through the thick canvas sacks of hardtack, fouling the biscuit with their droppings. You now understand that the weevils aren't the only extra ingredient in your daily bread. You've seen the evidence: tiny, dark droppings that you have to pick out of the biscuit before you soak it. Sometimes you wonder how many you've missed. They are even more audacious when it comes to the water supply. They drown in the open-topped water casks, their decaying bodies adding another layer of horror to the already putrid liquid. The crew has a grimly practical solution: they just fish the dead rat out and carry on. The water was already disgusting, a little rat-infused flavor doesn't make much of a difference. This practice is horrifically well documented in naval history, a testament to the extreme conditions sailors accepted as normal. This competition for resources creates a strange tension. You hate the rats, but you are also inextricably linked to them. Their presence is a sign that there is still food to be had. A common piece of sailor lore, though its truth is debated by historians, is the idea of the rated N cask. If you were buying provisions in port, you were supposed to look for the barrel with the most rat-gnawed holes in it. The logic was that the rats, with their superior sense of smell, would always target the freshest, best quality meat. So, the more rats a barrel attracted, the better its contents were likely to be. It's a bizarre form of rodent-based quality control. The ship has a cat, a scruffy, one-eyed creature named Bosun. But he is hopelessly outnumbered. He can catch one or two a day, which he proudly leaves on the quartermaster's doorstep. But it's like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. Some of the men have taken to hunting the rats themselves, using belaying pins and a lot of shouting. It's become a form of grisly entertainment on long, boring afternoons. But your relationship with the rats is about to enter a new, even more disturbing phase. You don't know it yet, but as the voyage drags on and the food supply dwindles and degrades, these pests will undergo a horrifying transformation in your mind. They will cease to be competitors. They will become a potential food source themselves. This is a gruesome but historically accurate reality for sailors in desperate situations. When starvation loomed, rats became roof rabbits. They were hunted, skinned, and roasted over the firebox. While not a standard part of the diet, they were a recognized emergency ration. The thought, for now, is unimaginable. You look at one scurrying past, its beady eyes glinting in the lantern light, and you feel a profound sense of revulsion. You clutch your ration of hardtack a little tighter. It's crawling with weevils, possibly contaminated with rat droppings, and it tastes like dust, but it's your food. The rats are a constant, gnawing reminder of how precarious your existence is. You are all trapped on this wooden rock together, floating in an endless sea, fighting over the same barrel of moldy crackers. You wonder who is more desperate, you or them. The rats are just trying to survive, same as you. There is no romance in this struggle, no glory. It's a primal, ugly contest for calories. And as you lie in your hammock tonight, listening to the scratching inside the walls, you'll be thinking not of treasure or adventure, but of the silent relentlessness of the ship's hold. A war that you are slowly but surely losing. It starts subtly. A feeling of profound weariness that sleep doesn't seem to cure. Your muscles ache as you climb the rigging, a deeper ache than the usual soreness from hard labor. You feel irritable, listless. At first, you dismiss it as just the consequence of your miserable diet and the grinding monotony of life at sea. Everyone feels this way, right? But then you notice other more specific signs. Your gums feel tender and swollen. When you press on them with your tongue, they feel spongy and sore. One morning, after chewing on a particularly stubborn piece of soaked hardtack, you see a smear of blood on the biscuit when you take it out of your mouth. You tell yourself you just bit your cheek, but a cold knot of fear tightens in your stomach. You've heard the old sailors talk about it in hushed, fearful tones. They call it the scourge of the sea, the landlubber's disease. The formal name is scurvy, but on this ship, it's a word spoken like a curse. You start observing the other men more closely. You see the signs everywhere now that you know what to look for. You see a sailor whose teeth look unnaturally prominent, as if they are pulling away from his swollen, purplish gums. You see another man wince in pain as he simply walks across the deck, his joints inflamed and aching. An old wound on another man's arm, a cut he got weeks ago that had healed into a neat scar, has started to look red and puffy again, as if the injury were fresh. This is the insidious, terrifying nature of scurvy. It's not an infection or a virus. It's a disease of deficiency caused by a complete lack of vitamin C. Your body needs vitamin C to produce collagen, the glue that holds your cells, skin, and blood vessels together. Without it, your body literally starts to fall apart. The diet on this ship is a perfect storm for scurvy. The hardtack has no vitamins. The salted meat, whatever nutritional value it once had, has been obliterated by the salting and boiling process. The only source of vitamin C would be fresh fruits and vegetables, and you haven't seen one of those since you left port months ago. You try to ignore the symptoms to push through the exhaustion, but it gets worse. You develop strange, dark bruises on your legs, even though you don't remember bumping into anything. Your skin becomes dry and rough. The slightest scratch bleeds more than it should and takes forever to scab over. The old sailors have their own theories and folk remedies. Some believe it's caused by the foul sea air. Others think it's a result of laziness. The proposed cures are just as varied and useless. They might tell you to drink more grog, to swallow mouthfuls of seawater, or even to bury yourself up to your neck in warm sand, should you ever reach land. One of the more bizarre but historically documented proposed cures was a turf bath, where a patient was covered in soil, in the hopes that the essence of the earth would heal them. It was, of course, completely ineffective. The real cure was known to some, but not widely understood or practiced. As far back as the 1600s, some captains noted that citrus fruits like lemons and limes could prevent or cure the disease. The British Royal Navy would later make lemon juice a mandatory part of a sailor's diet, effectively vanquishing scurvy from their fleets and earning British sailors the nickname Lemmies. But that's in the future. For you on this pirate ship in the middle of the ocean, there are no lemons. The historical debate here isn't about whether scurvy existed, but about the sheer scale of its devastation. Some historians estimate that from the 16th to the 18th century, scurvy killed more sailors than all other diseases, naval battles, and shipwrecks combined. It was the single greatest danger of a long sea voyage. It was the single greatest danger of a long sea voyage. A ship could be lost not to a storm, but to a crew too weak and sick to manage the sails. You look at your own hands, at the small cuts that refuse to heal properly. You run your tongue over your sore, bleeding gums. The fear is no longer a knot in your stomach, it's a cold, constant presence. The enemy isn't a Spanish warship on the horizon. It's inside your own body, which is slowly, inexorably, coming unglued. The quest for golden glory seems like a ridiculous joke now. The only thing you're searching for is a piece of fruit. That's a treasure more precious and far more elusive than any chest of gold. Just when the mood on the ship has reached its absolute lowest point, something remarkable happens. The lookout, perched high up on the mainmast, lets out a cry. It's not the feared sail-ho that means a potential battle, nor the desperate land-ho that you've all been praying for. It's something else, a shout filled with a strange, joyful excitement. Fish, a whole school of him, off the starboard bow. Suddenly, the lethargy that has gripped the crew evaporates. Men who were just moments ago slumped against the railings, nursing their aching joints and gums, are now scrambling for fishing lines. It's a flurry of activity you haven't seen since you left port. Hand lines, baited with scraps of salt pork, fought a sacrifice of precious calories for the chance that something better are thrown overboard. A small net, usually used for scooping things from the water, is hastily unfurled. You watch, your own heart pounding with a hope you thought you had lost. You see the lines go taut. Men shout and swear with excitement as they haul them in. On the end of the lines are beautiful, silvery fish, flapping and twisting in the sunlight. They aren't huge, mostly small tuna and bonito, but they are the most beautiful things you have ever seen. They are fresh. The deck, usually a place of monotonous chores, is transformed into a chaotic, joyous processing plant. The fish are gutted and scaled right there, the entrails tossed overboard to the circling gulls. The cook, Silas, has a genuine smile on his face for the first time. He abandons his pot of simmering sludge and directs the men to build up the fire in the firebuck. The smell is intoxicating. Not the smell of spice trying to mask rot, but the clean, savory scent of fish grilling over an open flame. It fills the entire ship, the perfume of pure, unadulterated hope. There is no hardtack tonight, no salted mystery meat. For the first time in months, you are going to eat a meal that was alive just a few hours ago. When you finally get your portion served on a piece of sailcloth because you don't want to taint it with your dirty wooden bowl, you can hardly believe it. It's a piece of grilled fish, seasoned with nothing but a sprinkle of salt. It's flaky, moist, and tastes of the sea in a good way. You take your first bite, and it's a revelation. Your mouth, so used to the textures of rock and leather, is filled with the tender flake of the fish. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated bliss. You eat slowly, savoring every single mouthful. You watch the other men doing the same. There's very little talking, just the sound of contented eating. For a brief, shining moment, you are not pirates, not desperate men on a miserable voyage. You are just men enjoying a good meal. The divisions, the fear of scurvy, it all melts away in the face of this simple, profound pleasure. This was the dream on any long voyage, a lucky catch. Fish, turtles, even seabirds could provide a welcome and vitally important break in the monotony of the preserved rations. A sea turtle, in particular, was a grand prize. It was a walking larder, providing fresh meat for days and a source of fresh blood, which some sailors drank in the belief that it could ward off scurvy. This belief, while gruesome, had a tiny kernel of truth, as fresh blood contains trace amounts of vitamin C. Historians often wonder just how much fresh food sailors were able to supplement their diet with. Was an event like this a once-in-a-voyage miracle, or a semi-regular occurrence? The answer is likely tied to location and luck. In certain parts of the ocean, teeming with marine life, fishing might have been a reliable source of food. In other, more barren stretches of sea, a crew could go for months without a single bite of fresh protein. The feast lasts all evening. The men eat their fill, and for the first time, you feel properly full. The quartermaster, seeing the boost in morale, even issues an extra ration of grog to celebrate. There's singing, real singing, not the tuneless mumbling you're used to. Stories are told, jokes are shared. The ship feels alive again. As you lie in your hammock that night, your stomach full of fresh fish, the future feels possible again. The aches in your joints seem a little duller, the soreness in your gums less pronounced. It's probably just your imagination, a psychological boost from the good food and improved mood. But it feels real. You know it won't last. Tomorrow you will be back to the salted beef and the weevil wye biscuits. The barrels of despair are still waiting in the hold. But for one perfect, sun-drenched afternoon, you had a reprieve. You had a taste of the life you left behind, a reminder of what real food is. And that memory, that brief, delicious moment of normalcy, will have to be enough to sustain you through the hard weeks to come. The euphoria of the fish feast fades as quickly as it came, leaving behind an even starker reality. The memory of fresh food makes the daily sludge seem even more inedible. But a new, more urgent problem is beginning to overshadow even the horrors of the galley. The ship has sailed into the doldrums. The sea, which for months was a churning, dynamic force, has turned into a flat, glassy plain. The sails hang limp and useless against the masts. The sun beats down with a relentless, punishing heat. The ship just sits there motionless, baking under a white-hot sky. You are becalmed. At first, it's a novelty, a strange and silent break from the constant motion. But after a day, then two, then three, the silence becomes oppressive. The heat is suffocating. And the water situation, which was already dire, has become a full-blown crisis. The quartermaster cuts the water ration in half. The daily grog, which was once a way to make the swamp water palatable, is now mostly water with just a whisper of rum. It's served warm, and the heat seems to amplify its foul, brackish taste. Your thirst becomes a constant, physical presence. Your mouth is always dry, your tongue feels thick and sticky, and you dream of cool, clear water. You learn that thirst is a crueler master than hunger. You can survive for weeks without food, but only a few days without water. The heat makes you sweat, and with every drop of sweat, you are losing precious fluid that you cannot replace. The men become sluggish, their movements slow and deliberate to conserve energy. Tempers fray. Arguments break out over the smallest things, a misplaced tool, an imagined slight. The camaraderie of the fish feast is a distant memory. You see the quartermaster checking the main water cask every few hours, his face a mask of grim concentration. He's doing the terrifying math of survival, how much water is left versus how many men need to drink it, versus how many days or weeks you might be trapped here. This is where the true horror of the age of sail reveals itself. A ship, for all its power and freedom, was utterly at the mercy of the wind. Being becalmed was a death sentence delivered in slow motion. Historical accounts are filled with harrowing tales of ships drifting for weeks, their crews slowly dying of thirst while surrounded by an endless, undrinking ocean. Some of the men, driven half-mad by thirst, try to drink seawater. The older sailors stop them, sometimes by force. They know that drinking salt water is one of the worst things you can do. It seems like a solution, but the high concentration of salt actually dehydrates you faster, drawing water out of your cells and speeding up the process of kidney failure. It's a desperate, fatal mistake. A strange, little-known fact from this period is the invention of devices to distill fresh water from seawater. As early as the 1682, people had patented contraptions for boiling seawater and collecting the steam, which would be fresh water. However, these devices were often inefficient, required huge amounts of fuel, which was also in short supply, and were not widely adopted. So for your crew, the technology might as well not exist. The debate among historians is often about the psychological impact of being becalmed. How long did it take for discipline to break down? When did the rigid structure of the ship, the captain, the quartermaster, the crew dissolve into a desperate mob of individuals on your ship? You can feel it starting to happen. The quartermaster now carries a pistol tucked into his belt when he doles out the water ration. The captain barely comes out of his cabin. The men gather in small, suspicious groups, whispering undying the remaining water casks. You find yourself staring at the horizon for hours, praying for a ripple, a cloud, a single sign of wind. The sun glares back, indifferent. Your world has shrunk to the size of this hot, motionless ship. Your ambitions have shrunk with it. You no longer dream of gold or plunder. You dream of a single cloud. You fantasize about rain. The taste of a drop of fresh, clean rainwater on your cracked lips has become the ultimate treasure, the most exquisite luxury imaginable. As another sweltering, windless day comes to an end, a new kind of fear sets in. It's the fear of a slow, quiet death, not in a glorious battle, but in this suffocating stillness. You are a ship of ghosts, adrift on a dead ocean, waiting for a breath of wind that may never come. The wind has not returned. The sun continues its daily assault. The water rations have been cut again, reduced to a mere half cup of lukewarm slime per day. The thirst is a fire in your throat. But in the midst of this slow-motion disaster, another, more mundane crisis emerges. Your teeth hurt. It started a few days ago. You were trying to gnaw on a piece of dry hardtack, your hunger momentarily overriding your disgust with the weevils. As you bit down, a sharp, cracking sound echoed in your own skull, followed by a searing pain in your jaw. You spat out the contents of your mouth and saw, to your horror, a piece of your own molar mixed in with the biscuit dust. You've broken a tooth on a piece of bread. You look at the biscuit in your hand. It's no longer food. A beige, flour-based rock. The lack of moisture in the air has made it even harder and more brittle than usual. It's become a genuine dental hazard. You're not the only one. The next day, one of the older sailors, a man named Finn, lets out a yelp of pain during the meager evening meal. H.E.S. holding his jaw, a look of pure agony on his face. H.E.D. tried to break a biscuit with his teeth, a foolish move born of desperation, and has paid the price, The ship's carpenter, who also serves as its unofficial surgeon and dentist, is summoned. The procedure is brutal and simple. Finn is given a large swig of rum to hold in his mouth, the only anesthetic available. Two other sailors hold him down. The carpenter approaches with a pair of rusty pliers from his toolbox. There is no finesse, no dentistry. It's pure extraction. You turn away, but you can't block out the sound of sickening crunch, followed by a scream that is quickly muffled by the rum and his own hand. This was the grim reality of dental care at sea. There was none. A broken tooth or an abscess could be a death sentence. Infection was a constant risk, and with the scurvy already weakening every honest bodies and preventing proper healing, even a small dental problem could spiral into a fatal fever. The hardness of the hardtack is legendary. There are countless stories and accounts of its incredible density. In some naval museums, you can still see hardtack that was used as a picture frame or carved into decorations by sailors with an abundance of time and a need for durable materials. One apocryphal story, popular in the Royal Navy, claimed that a shipload of hardtack was sold as surplus and the buyer tried to use it as gravel for a path, only to find it was too durable and had to be disposed of as building material. Whether that specific story is true is debated by historians, but it speaks to a larger truth about the biscuit's formidable nature. The question isn't whether it was hard, but how sailors managed to eat it without systemic dental destruction. The soaking method was key, but when water was rationed as strictly as it is now, you couldn't afford to spare any for your biscuit. You had to eat it dry or not at all. This leads to a new form of culinary innovation born of desperation. You see sailors using belaying pins or small hammers to grind the biscuit into a coarse powder. They then try to swallow the powder dry, a choking, unpleasant process, or mix it with their tiny ration of grog to create a gritty, alcoholic paste. It's a miserable way to eat, but it's better than breaking another tooth. Your own jaw throbs with a dull, constant take. The broken tooth has a sharp edge that keeps cutting your tongue. Every sip of the foul water is an agony as the liquid hits the exposed nerve. You are being physically worn down by your own food. You look at the sacks of hardtack with a new kind of hatred. They are a source of pain. A silent, relentless enemy in this war of attrition. You are trapped on a ship with no wind, no water, and now, a food source that actively fights back, that breaks you piece by piece. The golden age of piracy feels your entire world has been reduced to the throbbing pain in your jaw and the desperate, all-consuming need for a single drop of rain. The monotony of the becalmed sea is broken by a rare event, the opening of a new barrel of meat. The last one was finally scraped clean, its greenish, leathery dregs consumed with a grim sense of duty. The quartermaster, with a theatrical sigh, directs the sailors to heave a fresh barrel up from the hold. A small crowd gathers to watch, their faces a mixture of hope and dread. Is this one going to be better or worse? The lid is pried open with a crowbar, the sound of splintering wood echoing across the silent deck. A smell wafts out. It's not the sharp, clean scent of salt, but a deeper, muskier odor. It smells old. The quartermaster peers inside. Beef, he declares, though without much conviction. He hooks the first slab and pulls it out. It's a dark, forbidding block, almost black, and glistening with a thick, syrupy brine. It looks less like something the cow and more like a geological sample from a strange planet. One of the younger sailors, a new recruit like yourself, squints at it. Looks more like pork to me, he mutters, just loud enough to be heard. An older sailor scoffs. Pork, that ain't pork. That's beef from a Spanish cow. You can tell by the grain. Grain, it's a black rock. Another one chimes in. Could be horse for all I know. And so begins the great meat debate, a common pastime on long voyages. With the meat so heavily salted, aged, and discolored, its original identity becomes a matter of speculation and argument. The visual and textural clues that distinguish beef from pork or mutton are completely erased. All you're left with is a generic, salty, fibrous protein block. The argument gets surprisingly heated. Factions form. Team beef points to the sheer size of the slab. Team pork argues that the fat, what little there is of it, has the wrong color for beef. A third, more cynical party, Team mystery, He insists it could be anything: goat, horse, maybe even something more exotic. The ship's supplier, they argue, could have thrown anything into the barrel, knowing that after 2 years soaking in salt, no one would be the wiser. This uncertainty was a genuine issue. Naval victualling records are precise, listing barrels of salt beef and salt pork, but the men eating the contents often had their doubts. The process of preservation was so extreme that it acted as a great equalizer, reducing all meats to a common state of being salt junk. This brings up a weirdly specific historical mystery that food historians and maritime experts still argue about: the 2-year-old rule. Some naval traditions held that salted meat was not considered prime until it had been in the barrel for at least 2 years. Was this because the aging process genuinely improved the flavor in some strange way, making it less raw and more intensely savory, like a country ham, or was it a purely practical bit of folklore, a way to justify the fact that the meat they were eating was, by necessity, ancient? The consensus leans towards the latter. It's easier to eat something that's 2 years old if you convince yourself that it's supposed to be 2 years old. The cook, Silas, ends the debate by unceremoniously grabbing the slab and hacking off a piece with his cleaver. He tosses it into his pot, and the argument dies down unresolved. It doesn't really matter what it was. It's all just to now. Later, as you chew on your portion of the new meat, you try to decide for yourself. Does it have the subtle, deep flavor of beef or the faint, lingering sweetness of pork? It's impossible to tell. It tastes of salt, of brine, of the barrel it came from, and of the faint, metallic tang of decay. It tastes like defeat. You look across the deck and catch the eye of the sailor who was convinced it was pork. He raises his eyebrows in a silent question. You just shrug. What's the difference? It fills your stomach. It keeps you alive. That's all you can ask of it now. The great meat debate is over for today, but you know it will flare up again the next time a new barrel is opened. It's a small distraction, a way to pass the time and to inject a little human drama into the soul-crushing sameness of your diet. It's a way of pretending you still have choices, that you can still distinguish one thing from another in a world that has been boiled down to a single monotonous, salty flavor. But as you swallow another leathery piece, you know the truth. It doesn't matter what it's called. It's just junk. The ship remains trapped in the dead, glassy sea. The brief distraction of the meat debate has faded, and the grim reality of your physical decay has returned with a vengeance. The scurvy is no longer a subtle, creeping dread. It is a full-blown, waking nightmare. You wake up one morning and smile grimly at the irony you can't smile. Your lips are cracked and swollen, and your gums have become horrifying, spongy masses of purple flesh that bleed at the slightest touch. They have swollen so much that they have started to grow over your teeth, hiding them in a foul, painful shroud. You look in the small, cracked piece of mirror that one of the sailors has. The reflection is of a stranger. Your skin has a pale, pasty look, covered in the dark, spot-ski bruises that now appear with no cause. Your eyes are sunken and listless. You look ancient, but the teeth are the worst part. You gently poke one of your front teeth with your finger. It wiggles. Not just a little, but a lot, as if it's a loose stir in a crumbling wall. The collagen that holds your teeth in their sockets has dissolved. One by one, they are coming untethered from your jaw. You see Finn, the man who had his tooth pulled by the carpenter. His situation is even worse. His remaining teeth are so loose he can move them back and forth with his tongue. He can no longer chew at all. He survives by powdering his hardtack and mixing it into a thin, watery gruel with his grog ration, swallowing it like a baby. This is the classic, terrifying symptom of advanced scurvy. It turns your mouth into a ruin. But the disease has other, even more surreal horrors in store. You look down at your leg, at a scar you got from a fall on the rigging a month ago. It had healed completely, leaving a thin white line. Now the scar has reopened. The skin has split apart along the old line, and the wound looks fresh and raw, which is somehow even more disturbing. Your body is literally unhealing itself. The collagen that formed the scar tissue has broken down, and your body lacks the raw materials to replace it. Old wounds, fractures that mended years ago, all begin to ache and even break apart again. The past is returning to haunt your body. The ship has become a floating infirmary. More than half the crew is now seriously ill. Men lie on the deck, too weak to move, their limbs swollen and bloated with a condition called scurvy bloat. Their breathing is shallow and dragged. The smell of sickness and decay hangs heavy in the hot, still air, a smell even worse than the bilge water. The historical accounts of advanced scurvy are some of the most horrific texts you can read. They describe men whose joints swelled to the size of melons, whose bones became so brittle they would break from just rolling over in their bunks. The psychological toll was just as devastating. Men became deeply depressed, apathetic, or prone to fits of hysteria. There is a fierce, ongoing academic discussion about the exact mortality rate of scurvy on a given voyage. How many men really died from it, it's hard to know for sure, as ship's logs often listed the cause of death as fever or consumption. But it's clear that on a long voyage without fresh provisions like yours, losing half the crew was not uncommon. Scurvy was the silent, indiscriminate killer of the age of sail. The captain, who has been holed up in his cabin, finally emerges. He looks as bad as everyone else, his face pale and drawn. He announces a desperate measure. Any man who can still work will spend the day attempting to row the ship, using the long, heavy sweeps. It's a futile gesture. A few men weakly pull at the massive oars, trying to move a ship that weighs hundreds of tons. It's like trying to push a mountain. You sit on the deck, your body aching, your mouth a source of constant, low-grade pain. You feel a strange sense of detachment, as if you're watching this happen to someone else. The dreams of adventure are a bitter mocking joke. You are not a fearsome pirate. You are a dying man on a dying ship, and your own body is waging a civil war against itself, methodically dismantling itself piece by piece. The only question left is which part will give out first. The official rations are, for all practical purposes, gone. The last of the hardtack has been powdered and consumed, a dusty memory in your throat. The final barrel of salt junk was emptied days ago, its black, foul-smelling brine tipped overboard. The ship's larder is empty. But the hunger remains. It's a physical entity now, a hollow, gnawing beast in your belly that scurvy and thirst cannot silence. It is at this point that the definition of food begins to dissolve. The line between object and sustenance blurs, erased by primal need. The first suggestion comes from one of the oldest sailors, a man with no teeth left, his face a roadmap of suffering. He points a trembling finger at a pile of discarded leather offcuts near the carpenter's station, scraps of rigging, old patches for sails, the sole of a worn-out boot. There, he rasps, his voice a dry whisper. Soup. The idea is so shocking, so fundamentally wrong, that you almost laugh. But then you look at the faces of the other men. There is no shock. There is only a flicker of desperate, calculating interest. And so, the experiment begins. You watch as men collect the leather scraps. They are stiff, caked with salt, tar, and grime. The first step is to boil them in seawater to clean them. A process that creates a foul-smelling, scummy broth that is quickly thrown overboard. Then, the cleaned, softened leather is cut into thin strips and put into a pot with the last of the precious, rationed fresh water. The pot simmers for hours over a low fire, the fuel for which is now being carefully rationed from broken planks and old crates. The smell is indescribable. It's the smell of a tannery mixed with a shoe repair shop, with an undercurrent of hot, wet animal hide. After an entire day of boiling, the leather has begun to break down, releasing its collagen into the water, creating a thin, greasy, gelatinous liquid. This is the soup. You are given a cup of the hot, murky liquid. It has no flavor, only a strange, slick texture and a faint, unpleasant smell. You swallow it, and it fills your stomach. It feels like you've eaten something. The purely caloric value is minimal, but it's more than zero. It's a psychological victory, a temporary truce with the beast of hunger. This is a grim but well-documented survival tactic from the age of sail and polar exploration. Desperate men would boil anything made of rawhide. Herein lies a morbidly fascinating, niche piece of knowledge. The type of leather method. Leather tanned with vegetable tannin method was largely indigestible and could even be poisonous. But unt and rawhide, or leather tanned with fats, would, after extensive boiling, break down into an edible, if disgusting, gelatin. Had no idea about the chemistry. For them, it was a deadly game of trial and error. But the leather soup is not enough. The hunger returns, sharp and demanding. The men's eyes turn to other objects. The candles. The ship's candles are made of tallow-rendered animal fat. They are meant for light, but fat is calories. You watch a man take a knife and carefully scrape the waxy tallow from a candle, leaving the wick behind. He rolls the greasy shavings into a little bowl and swallows it whole, his face a mask of revulsion and necessity. You do the same. The tallow coats your mouth with a thick, greasy film. The taste is rancid and vile, but it is the densest source of energy on the entire ship. This is where historians enter a debate. Was the consumption of these non-foods a genuine, life-extending survival strategy, or was it more of a desperate, final ritual? Did the handful of calories gained from a boiled boot sole or a ball of candle wax actually outweigh the energy expended to procure and prepare it, or did it simply provide the feeling of a full stomach, a psychological comfort that did little to stave off the inevitable? As you force down another greasy scraping of tallow, you feel the answer is likely somewhere in the middle. It's not saving you, but it's keeping you from giving up. It's an act of defiance against the silence of the sea and the emptiness of your own stomach. Your eyes, however, are beginning to drift elsewhere. The hunger is making you see the world differently. You look at the rats, the sleek, fat creatures that scurry in the shadows. For months they were a disgusting pest, a competitor. But now, as you lick the last of the foul-tasting tallow from your fingers, you look at them and see something else. You see meat. You see walking, breathing, scurrying rations. The final taboo is beginning to crumble. The shift in perspective is terrifyingly swift. One day, the rats are a vile nuisance you shoo away with a kick. The next, they are the most valuable resource on the ship. The unspoken agreement to ignore them as a potential food source dissolves overnight, not with a formal declaration, but with a quiet, desperate consensus. The great rat hunt has begun. It starts in the twilight hours when the rats are most active. You see two sailors, their faces gaunt and their eyes wide with a hunter's focus, crouched near a pile of old canvas. They are armed with belaying pins, the short, heavy wooden clubs normally used for securing ropes. They are utterly silent, barely breathing, waiting. A large, sleek rat darts out from under the canvas. There is a sudden, violent blur of motion, a sickening thud, and then a triumphant, guttural cry from one of the sailors. He holds up the limp body by its tail, a trophy in the war against starvation. Soon, the entire ship is consumed by the hunt. Men who were too weak to stand are now animated by this new, primal purpose. They set crude snares made from bits of string. They stalk the dark corners of the hold. Their only light a single, precious candle. It's a grisly, desperate sport. The ship, once a place of structured maritime labor, has become a hunting ground. You join them. You have to. The hunger is a physical pain, a constant, twisting knot in your gut that overpowers all other thoughts. You corner a rat near the bilge pump. It turns to face you, its beady eyes glinting. For a moment, you see not a pest, but a fellow creature fighting for its life. Then the hunger takes over. You bring the pin down hard. The preparation is just as grim as the hunt. The rats are skinned, a delicate and disgusting task. Their tiny bodies are then either spitted on a piece of wire and roasted over the dwindling fire in the firebox, or they are dropped into the pot of boiling leather water, adding a bit of substance to the gelatinous broth. The smell of roasting rat is thin and gummy, but it is the smell of meat. When you are given your portion, a tiny, charred carcass, you eat it with a detached, mechanical focus. The meat is stringy and has a strange, slightly sweet taste. There is very little of it on the tiny bones, but it is undeniably protein. This practice, while horrifying, is a historically documented reality for starving sailors. They called the rats millers or roof rabbits, euphemisms to make the act more palatable. In the grim calculus of survival, a rat was a self-sustaining food source. They consumed the inedible parts of the ship, the old ropes, the deepest dregs in the hold, and converted them into flesh that the men could then eat. They were, in a way, the ship's last and most efficient food production system. The gourmet aspect of this is a subject of some, albeit morbid, historical curiosity. Were certain rats preferred over others? Some accounts suggest that the rats from the biscuit room were considered the cleanest, while those from the bilge were to be avoided. There's a debate about whether this was based on any real difference in taste or safety, or if it was purely a psychological coping mechanism. A way to create a hierarchy of disgust, to feel some semblance of control over the horrific act of eating a rodent. The rat population on the ship, once seemingly infinite, begins to dwindle. The hunts become harder, the prey more elusive. The rats, it seems, are learning. They retreat deeper into the ship's structure, into places where the men cannot reach them. The brief reprieve that the rat meat provided is coming to an end. You lie in your hammock, the strange gummy aftertaste of your meal still in your mouth. You have crossed a line you never thought you would approach. You have become a hunter of vermin. You have eaten a creature that thrives on filth. You have done what was necessary to survive another day. But as the last of the rats disappear into the inaccessible corners of the ship, a new, even colder fear begins to dawn. The leather is almost gone. The rats are now too smart to be caught. The larder is empty once again. And you will still be calmed, still starving. You look around at the other men, at their hollow eyes and skeletal frames, and for the first time, you find yourself wondering what will be hunted next. The silence is the worst part. The ship used to be a place of constant noise, the creak of the hull, the snap of sails, the rhythmic chants of men at work, the arguments, the laughter. Now an unnatural quiet has fallen, the silence of a tomb. You are adrift in a truly silent world, both outside and in. The sea is glass, the sky is empty, and the men have run out of things to say. All the temporary solutions have been exhausted. The leather has been boiled to a pulp. The candle stubs are gone. The rats have vanished, either eaten or hidden away. There is nothing left. The fire in the galley has been extinguished, its fuel spent. There is no more soup to be made, no more roof rabbits to be roasted. The pretense of meals is over. Now there is only waiting. You lie on the hot, splintery deck, too weak to move. Your body has consumed all its fat, and now it is consuming its own muscle. You are a living skeleton draped in loose, bruised skin. Your mind, starved of energy, has begun to play tricks on you. You hallucinate. You hear lush green islands on the horizon that vanish when you try to focus. You hear the sound of rain, a gentle patter on the deck, but when you look up, the sky is a cruel, cloudless blue. You have vivid waking dreams of food, not just a piece of fruit or a loaf of bread, but elaborate, impossible feasts. You can smell roasted meats, taste buttery paste running down your chin. The memories are so real, so intense, that returning to the stark reality of your parched, throat and hollow stomach is a fresh agony every time. The social structure of the ship has completely disintegrated. The captain remains in his cabin, a ghost behind a locked door. The quartermaster, no longer in charge of rations, is just another starving man. The crew has broken down into a collection of isolated, dying individuals. No one speaks. No one makes eye contact. To look at another man is to see your own horrifying reflection, a walking corpse. This is the ultimate nightmare of the age of sail, the scenario that haunted every sailor's imagination. Being becalmed and running out of food was not a rare or freak occurrence. It was a known and terrifying risk of the job. Historical records, from naval logs to castaway narratives, are filled with accounts of these ships of death. They were often found months, or even years later, drifting aimlessly, their crews long dead from thirst and starvation. The question that historians and psychologists still grapple with is the progression of despair in such a situation. What is the breaking point? When does the hope of rescue finally die? When does the mind give up on your ship? That point has been reached. The men no longer stare at the horizon, searching for a sail or a cloud. They just stare into space, their eyes vacant. The energy for hope has been expended. You feel a profound sense of detachment from your own body. The pain from the scurvy, the gnawing hunger, the burning thirst, it all seems to be happening to someone else, a distant figure you are observing. You feel your own life force ebbing away, like the tide going out. leaving you stranded. The sun begins to set, painting the sky with beautiful indifferent colors. In a world of plenty, it would be a breathtaking sight. Here it's just a marker of another day of suffering past, and another one to come. The beauty of the natural world has become a mockery of your condition. As darkness falls, a new sound breaks the oppressive silence. It's a low, desperate sobbing. One of the younger sailors, a boy from a small fishing village, has finally broken. The sound is raw and full of a pain that goes beyond hunger or thirst. It's the sound of a spirit shattering. No one goes to comfort him. No one has the strength. His sobs echo across the dead still deck. The only sound in a world that seems to have forgotten you exist. You close your eyes not to sleep, but just to shut out the sight of the endless, empty ocean. This is it. This is the end. There are no more desperate measures to take, no more grim innovations to try. There is only this vast, silent, all-consuming emptiness. In the suffocating stillness, a new sound emerges, and it is more terrible than the sobbing. It is the sound of a whisper. A few of the sailors, the ones with the last, desperate flicker of strength, have gathered in the shadow of the mainmast. Their voices are low and raspy, dry leaves skittering across stone. You are close enough to hear, and what you hear will haunt you forever. They are talking about the custom of the sea. The custom of the sea was the unwritten, horrifying law that governed when a ship's crew was faced with certain death from starvation. When all other food was gone, the crew would have to resort to the ultimate taboo survival cannibalism. To avoid a chaotic, murderous free-for-all, they developed a chillingly rational and procedural approach. They would draw law. The whispers you overhear are about the mechanics of this grim lottery. Should they use playing cards, the man who draws the ace of spades is the one. Or should they use straws of different lengths, the one who draws the short straw makes the ultimate sacrifice, so that the others might live a little longer. You listen, frozen with a terror that cuts through your lethargy. They are not talking about murder. In their starved, desperate minds, this is not a criminal act. It is a terrible necessity, a quasi-legal proceeding sanctioned by a tradition born of countless similar nightmares. They are discussing the fairest way to choose who will become the next unlost meal. This is not a fiction. The custom of the sea is a documented historical phenomenon. The most famous case is that of the English yacht Enigmatic, which sank in 1884. The 4 survivors, adrift in a small dinghy, ran out of food. After weeks of starvation, they killed and ate the cabin boy, who was the weakest and already near death. When they were rescued, they were put on trial in a landmark case that tested the very definition of murder and necessity. Their defense was that they had simply followed the custom of the sea. The debate among historians is not whether this happened, but how widespread it truly was. Was it an incredibly rare, last resort measure, spoken of more than it was practiced, or was it a grim, accepted part of the sailor's code, a known risk of the profession that everyone understood, but no one spoke of until they had to? The evidence is sparse, as survivors were often reluctant to speak of what they had done. But the stories persist, from the wrecks of 17th-century galleons to the Franklin expedition in the Arctic. The men whispering in the dark are debating the rules. Does the captain have to draw, or is he exempt? What about the boy who is already close to death? Should he be chosen automatically to spare him further suffering, as happened on the Enigmatic, or does everyone, regardless of rank or condition, have to take their chance? The fairest method, they seem to agree, is that everyone participates. Everyone gets a chance to live, and everyone gets a chance to die. You feel a cold sweat on your brow, despite the oppressive heat. Your heart, which has been beating with a slow, weak rhythm, begins to pound in your chest. This is the final stage of the ship's descent into hell. You are no longer a crew. You are a collection of potential victims and reluctant executioners. The whispers stop. A decision has been made. One of the men, a gaunt figure you can barely recognize, stands up and slowly, deliberately, begins to tear a piece of canvas into thin strips of different lengths. He is preparing the lots. You close your eyes, every muscle in your emaciated body tense. The hunger is gone, replaced by a pure crystalline fear. You are no longer waiting for a wind to save you. You are waiting for a hand to reach out, holding a strip of cloth, and show you your fate. The man holding the canvas strips takes a shaky step forward. The moment hangs in the air, thick and heavy as the humid night. The lottery of death is about to commence. Your throat is so dry you can't swallow. This is it. The end of the line. And then a sound splits the silence. It's a croak or broken sound from high above. Del and every head snaps up, perched in the crow's nest, so still that you'd all forgotten he was there as the lookout. It's the young boy who had been sobbing just the night before. HES pointing a skeletal finger towards the horizon, his voice cracking with disbelief. Land. How? It can't be. You've been tricked by hallucinations too many times. You refuse to believe it. It's another mirage, another cruel joke played by a starving mind. But then others see it too. A dark, low smudge on the horizon, almost invisible against the deep twilight sky. It's not a cloud, it's too solid to define. And as if summoned by a miracle, you feel it. A faint, cool whisper of air on your cheek. A breeze. It's barely there, just a hint of movement in the dead air, but it's real. The limp sails above you give a soft, hopeful flutter. The effect on the crew is instantaneous and electric. The grim lottery is forgotten. The strips of canvas fall from the man's hand, ignored on the deck. A current of pure, undiluted adrenaline surges through the ship. Men who were lying prostrate, seemingly moments from death, are now staggering to their feet. The captain stumbles out of his cabin, his eyes wide, staring at the horizon. The word land is the most powerful stimulant in the world. It's a promise of water, a promise of food, a promise of life. The breeze strengthens, slowly, tentatively, as if relearning its own strength. The sails begin to swell, catching the wind. The ship groans, the sound of a giant awakening from a long slumber. It begins to move. The gentle lapping of water against the hull is the sweetest music you have ever heard. But you are not saved yet. You are a skeleton crew in the truest sense of the word. The men are weak, ravaged by scurvy and starvation. Sailing the ship is a monumental task. Every action requires a colossal effort of will. Hauling on a rope feels like lifting a boulder. Turning the ships will take the combined strength of two men, their arms trembling with the strain. You find a strength you didn't know you had. Fueled by the last dregs of adrenaline and the intoxicating hope of survival, you work. You pull ropes alongside men who were your potential executioners just minutes ago. The shared purpose, the desperate, unified goal of reaching that dark smudge on the horizon, erases the horror of what almost was. The historical accounts of such moments are filled with this near-superhuman revival. The prospect of imminent rescue could jolt men from the deepest pits of scurvy-induced lethargy. The psychological boost was as potent as any medicine. The debate is whether this was a purely mental phenomenon, or if the adrenaline dump had a genuine, temporary physiological effect, allowing muscles to function beyond their normal, depleted capacity. Whatever the reason, you feel it. You are moving, you are working, you are alive. As the ship slowly, painfully, plows through the water, the dark smudge grows. It resolves into the shape of an island, green and lush and vibrant. You can almost smell the damp earth, the scent of vegetation. It's the smell of paradise. You are not thinking about treasure. You are not thinking about being a pirate. You are focused on one single primal image, a stream of fresh, clear water, a piece of fruit hanging from a tree, the simple, profound act of putting real food in your mouth. The ship crawls towards the island, a wounded beast dragging itself to safety. Every inch gained is a victory. The sun rises, and the island is bathed in the golden light of a new day. It is real. It is real. It is there. And with the last of your collective strength, you steer your floating craft in towards its shore, praying that you have enough life left in you to make it. The ship's anchor, a rusty hunk of iron you thought you'd never use again, plunges into the clear, turquoise water of the island's cove with a magnificent splash. The rattling chain is a sound of finality of arrival. You are here, you have made it. Getting to the shore is a clumsy, chaotic affair. The ship's boat is lowered into the water by trembling hands. You tumble into it, your legs too weak to properly support you. The short row to the whites and beach is an eternity. You can see it, smell it, almost taste it. The moment the boat scrapes against the sand, you don't wait. You fall out of it into the shallows and crawl, literally crawl, onto the beach. You press your face into the warm dumps, amped and tears of relief carving clean tracks through the grime on your cheeks. It is solid. It doesn't move. For the first time in months, the world is not rocking beneath you, but the thirst, that raging fire in your throat, drives you onward, staggering to your feet. You follow the sound of trickling water. You push through a curtain of broad, green leaves and there it is. A small stream, flowing from the island's jungled interior, spilling over smooth, dark rocks. The water is so clear, you can see every pebble on the stream. You fall to your knees and plunge your entire face into the stream, drinking like an animal. The water is cool, clean, and sweet. It's the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. It's a physical sensation of life pouring back into you. You drink until your stomach hurts, until you can't possibly hold another drop. Then the search for food begins. And you don't have to look far. The island is a treasure chest of life. You see trees laden with fruits you don't recognize, some yellow and oblong, others round and green. A sailor, wiser in the ways of the tropics, points out a coconut palm. Another man, with a last burst of energy, shimmies up the trunk and sends a few coconuts crashing to the ground. They are cracked open with the back of a hatchet. You are handed a piece. First, you drink the sweet, cloudy water inside, another wave of pure hydration and flavor. Then you scrape out the soft, white meat with your fingers. It's rich, fatty, and wonderfully, blessedly bland. It's the perfect food for a system that has forgotten how to digest. Then you find the real treasure. A low-lying bush, heavy with small, round, reddish fruits. You pop one into your mouth tentatively. It bursts with a flavor that is both sweet and tart, a spectacular explosion on your long-suffering tongue. Your scurvy, ravaged body screams with gratitude. This is vitamin C. This is the cure. You don't know its name, but you know instinctively. That this is the medicine you have been dying for. This scene, the desperate gorging on a new shore, is a recurring theme in survivor narratives. And it came with its own dangers. Starving men, upon finding an abundance of food, would often eat themselves to death. Their shrunken, atrophied stomachs unable to handle the sudden load. This is a phenomenon known as refeeding syndrome, a dangerous metabolic shift that can be fatal. It's a tragic irony that the very thing that says, you can also kill you. Whether your crew has the knowledge or the self-control to avoid this is a question historians might debate. Did experienced sailors know to start slow, with small amounts of broth or easily digestible fruit, or was the primal urge to feast simply too strong to resist? You see the men around you, their faces smeared with juice, their hands full of strange fruits and roots. There is no gluttony, only a quiet, desperate intensity. Everyone is focused on their own personal salvation. Later, someone manages to catch a few crabs scuttling in the rock pools. They are cooked over a fire on the beach, the first real fire you've had in weeks. The smell of the cooking shellfish is divine. You eat the sweet, salty meat, and you feel your strength slowly, miraculously, beginning to return. As evening falls, you lie on the beach, your stomach full of fruit and crab meat, your thirst quenched. The aches in your body already seem less severe. Your gums, though still swollen, have stopped bleeding. You look back at your ship, floating silently in the cove. It looks like a relic from another life, a haunted house. You have survived. You have survived. You have eaten a piece of fruit. And in this moment, that is a prize far greater than any pirate's treasure. The iron is your salvation, but it is also a trap. You have water and fruit, but you are still marooned, your ship in disrepair, your crew a shadow of its former self. After a week of slow, painful recovery, a new kind of restlessness sets in. The immediate fear of death has been replaced by the dull ache of uncertainty. What now? The answer appears on the horizon just as the island did. Sail ho! The lookout's cry is different this time. It's not a cry of desperate hope, but of sharp, calculating interest. A lone merchant ship, fat and slow, is passing a few miles off the coast. A meeting is called on the beach. The captain, his strength partially returned, lays out the situation. That ship is your only way out of here. You can't sell your own wreck of a vessel much further. You need their supplies, their sails, maybe even their ship itself. You are pirates after all. But a debate breaks out. Half the men are barely strong enough to stand, let alone fight. The ship is low on gunpowder, and you have no desire for a prolonged battle. The thought of combat, of violence, seems alien and exhausting after so many weeks of passive suffering. This is where the true nature of piracy reveals itself, stripped of all romance. It's not about glory or adventure. It's about risk assessment and resource management. The decision is made not to fight, but to plunder something far more valuable than gold food. You spend the day preparing. It's a pathetic-looking war party. You are still gaunt, your skin hanging loosely on your bones. You are armed, but your movements are slow, lacking the explosive energy of a healthy man. Your strategy is not to be fearsome, but to be fast. You wait until dusk, then you sail out to intercept the merchantman. You raise your black flag, the skull and crossbones, hoping the symbol alone will do most of the work. It does. The merchant crew, seeing a pirate ship appearing as if from nowhere, is thrown into a panic. They are traders, not fighters. When you board their vessel, there is no grand battle. The resistance is minimal and quickly collapses. Your crew, animated by a cold, desperate efficiency, ignores the captain's cabin and the cargo hold. You head straight for their larder. And there it is. Paradise. Their storeroom is full. There are sacks of fresh biscuits, not yet infested with weevils. There are barrels of salted meat that look reddish-brown, not green-black. There's a cask of beer. Most precious of all, there's a crate of onions and another of shriveled but still viable potatoes. To your eyes, this is more beautiful than a chest full of Spanish doubloons. This focus on plundering provisions is a historically accurate, though often overlooked, aspect of piracy. While treasure was the ultimate goal, a pirate crew's most common and most urgent need was for food, water, rope, sails, and medicine. Many pirate attacks were, in essence, glorified grocery runs. They would take what they needed to keep sailing and often let the ship and crew go. A common debate among historians is the level of violence in these encounters. The popular image is of bloody, swashbuckling battles. The reality was often more psychological. Pirates cultivated a terrifying reputation so that crews would surrender without a fight. A quick, clean, and bloodless takeover was the ideal outcome for both sides. It was business. Your crew works with a feverish intensity, transferring the barrels and sacks from their ship to yours. You are not gentle. Barrels are rolled, sacks are thrown. You are single-minded in your purpose. The merchant crew, huddled on their own deck under the watchful eyes of a few of your crewmates, just stare in bewilderment. They probably expected you to torture them for the location of their valuables. They seem confused that all you want is their potatoes. You take what you can carry, and then you vanish back into the twilight, leaving the confused merchant crew unharmed but significantly lighter in provisions. You have not become rich. You have not made a name for yourself in the annals of piracy. You have simply restocked your pantry. Back on your own ship, you stare at the new supplies. It's not a feast. It's the same grim menu of hardtack and salted meat, but it's special salt junk. And you have onions. The thought of a stew with actual, real onions in it is enough to make you weep with joy. You have committed an act of piracy not for wealth, but for a marginal improvement in your quality of life. And for now, that feels like the greatest victory in the world. With full bellies, partially mended bodies, and a hold stocked with plunder of the most practical kind, you finally arrive at a place that feels like a pirate's dream. It's not a deserted island, but a bustling, chaotic, others nestle. The name doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter. It's a temporary autonomous zone, a ramshackle town carved out of the jungle, ruled by no king and governed only by the laws of opportunity and strength. The moment you step ashore, your senses are overwhelmed. The air is thick with the smells of roasting pig, cheap rum, tropical flowers, and unwashed bodies. The sound is a constant din of a dozen different languages, shouting, raucous laughter, and the off-key singing of sea shanties. The shore is lined with taverns built from driftwood and salvaged planks, their doors wide open, spilling light and noise into the dusty street. This is where the plunder gets spent. Your share from the few minor prizes you took before the disaster, combined with a small bonus from the grocery run, isn't a fortune, but here it makes you a king for a day. You walk into the first tavern you see. It's dark, smoky, and crowded, and on a long table in the center is a feast. A whole roasted pig, its skin crackling and brown, platters of grilled fish, mountains of fresh fruit, and actual bread, soft, yeast-risen bread. It's the vision from your starvation-induced hallucinations made real. You sit down and you eat. You eat until you are so full it hurts. You eat with the ferocious intensity of a man who knows what it's like to chew on a leather boot. You drink real beer, cool and refreshing, not the watered-down, slimy grog. This is the other side of the coin. The misery and deprivation of the sea is what pays for this brief, glorious burst of indulgence on shore. The two are inextricably linked. One cannot exist without the other. This symbiotic relationship between hardship at sea and hedonism in port is central to understanding the pirate lifestyle. Life on the ship was brutal, monotonous, and disciplined in its own way. Ports like Tortuga were the release valve, the place where the pressure, the fear, and the misery could be vented in a torrent of consumption. You see your crewmates doing the same, their faces shining with sweat and grease. Men who were recently skeletal specters are now laughing, telling exaggerated stories of their survival, the horror of it already being polished into a heroic legend. The custom of the sea, the lottery of death, is not mentioned. It's a secret that will be buried here, under piles of pig bones and empty rum bottles. One of the great historical debates about these pirate havens is how they actually functioned. Were they truly anarchic, lawless places, or did they have their own complex, informal social structures and codes of conduct? The evidence suggests the latter. There was a kind of order amidst the chaos. Disputes were often settled with a formal duel rather than a back-alley knife fight. A pirate's reputation and his word were valuable currencies. It was a functioning, if violent and precarious, society. You spend your silver on things you never would have dreamed of caring about a month ago. You buy new boots, not because your old ones are worn, but because they are the same boots you once considered boiling for soup, and you can no longer bear to look at them. You buy a new shirt made of soft linen, just to feel something other than coarse, salt-stiffened canvas against your skin. As the night wears on, the tavern grows louder and wilder. You see the darker side of this paradise. Arguments turn into brawls. Men who were brothers of the coast at sea are now rivals over a game of cards or a tavern wench. The money is spent as quickly as it was earned, disappearing into the hands of tavern keepers, merchants, and gamblers. The pirate economy was one of rapid, frantic circulation. You stumble out into the warm night, your head spinning from the rum, your stomach groaning with the unaccustomed richness of the food. You have experienced the peak of the pirate life, the grand feast, the camaraderie, the fleeting feeling of wealth and freedom. It's everything you dreamed of when you first signed on. But as you look back at the chaotic, noisy tavern, you can't shake the memory of the silent, starving ship. You now understand that this feast is not a celebration of success, but a desperate, frantic attempt to forget the price that was paid to get here. The revelry lasts for 3 days. 3 glorious, hazy days of feasting, drinking, and forgetting. You sleep in a real bed, in a room above the tavern. You eat 3 meals a day, each one a miracle of freshness and flavor. You start to feel human again. The sallow, bruised look of scurvy is slowly fading from your skin. You can walk without your joints screaming in protest. The nightmare is receding, but on the 4th morning, a familiar sound cuts through the morning haze, the creak of ropes and the shouting of a quartermaster. Your captain has decided it's time to go. The money has run out, the good times are over, and the sea is calling again. You walk down to the dock, your new boots feeling heavy on your feet. Your ship, which you left as a floating wreck, has been transformed. The crew, under the direction of the carpenter and sailmaker, has been hard at work. The sails have been patched with new canvas. The rigging has been repaired. The hull has been scraped clean of the barnacles and seaweed that grew during the long weeks of being becalmed. The ship looks ready. It looks eager. And then you see it. A line of men is loading new provisions for the next voyage. And your heart sinks. They are rolling large, dark barrels up the gangplank. They are hoisting dusty, coarse canvas sacks from the dock. It's the same stuff. It's the same barrels of salted meat, the same sacks of stone-hard biscuit. You watch as a barrel of fresh water is brought aboard. It's fresh now, yes. But you know its future. You know about the slime, the stink, the inevitable transformation into swamp water. You see a young, optimistic-looking recruit, his face full of the same dumb hope you once had, eagerly helping to roll a barrel of salt pork into the hold. He has no idea what he is signing up for. He has no idea that he is loading his own misery, one barrel at a time. You are standing at the beginning of the cycle once again. The whole horrific, miserable, wonderful, terrible journey is about to repeat itself. The brief, glorious feast in Tortuga was not the end of the story. It was just an intermission. A temporary refueling stop in a never-ending quest for sustenance. This is the fundamental, grinding reality of the pirate's life that is so often ignored. It wasn't a linear progression from poverty to riches. It was a cycle. A cycle of deprivation at sea followed by indulgence in port, which led back to deprivation at sea. Most pirates didn't die rich. They died in battle from disease, at the end of a rope, or simply disappeared at sea, their ships becoming another one of the ghost vessels they all feared. The question that historians still can't definitively answer is, why did they do it? Why would anyone willingly sign up for this cycle of misery? Was the promise of a big score, that one legendary prize, enough to keep them going? Was the brief, anarchic freedom of the pirate haven worth the months of suffering, or was it simply that for many of these men, the alternative, a life of crushing poverty on land or brutal discipline in the navy, was even worse? The pirate ship, for all its horrors, offered them a vote, a share and a sliver of agency in a world that gave them none. You are given your orders. It's time to board. You take one last look at the chaotic, vibrant town, at the solid, unmoving ground. Then you turn and walk up the gangplank, back onto the floating prison that is also your only home. You find your spot at the rail, the same spot where you ate your first horrifying meal. The ship pulls away from the dock. The sounds and smells of the port town begin to fade, replaced once again by the familiar creak of the hull and the snap of the sails. You look out at the endless blue horizon. It no longer looks like a symbol of freedom. It looks like a vast, hungry void, a place that will try to kill you with thirst, with sickness, and with its own crushing emptiness. You are sailing back into the heart of the nightmare, voluntarily. Heading for the open sea, you have to ask yourself the same question the historians ask. Why you don't have an answer. All you know is that you're already here, and the cook is probably already soaking the meat for tonight's dinner. The ship sails on, a tiny, determined speck on an infinite blue canvas. The sun warms your face, and the fresh salt spray feels clean for now. The cycle begins anew, but something inside you has changed. The naive boy who boarded this ship seeking treasure is gone, replaced by a man who knows the true currency of this life: a full belly, a healed wound, a moment of peace. You are no longer dreaming of chests of gold. Your dreams are simpler, more profound. You dream of the sweet burst of a wild fruit, the taste of clean rainwater, the solid feel of land beneath your feet. These are the treasures you seek now, scattered and fleeting as they may be. The gentle rocking of the ship, once a source of nausea and fear, is now a familiar lullaby. Let it carry you now, away from the noise. Let the rhythmic creak of the timber and the soft whisper of the wind in the sails be the soundtrack to your rest. The hardships and the horrors of the day are done. They can be faced again tomorrow. But for now, there is only this gentle motion, this soft darkness. You are drifting not on a sea of despair, but on a current of deep, welcome sleep. The ocean will hold you. The stars will watch over you. Let go, drift away. Your own safe harbor, your own warm bed, is waiting for you at the end of this long, quiet night. The end of the article. Good night.